After 54 years in power, the tyrannical regime of the Assad family in Syria is over. Overnight, the surprise lightning offensive reached and overtook the capital city, Damascus. The Syrian army did not offer resistance and announced the end of the Bashar al-Assad regime. Assad reportedly fled by plane to an unknown destination. And in a dramatic turn, there are reports from the frontier indicating that Israeli tanks have moved into the no man's land, acting as a demilitarized buffer zone between the countries at war. More from ILTV's Steve Leibovitz.
Prime Minister Netanyahu was on the northern border and spoke about the developments in Syria as being historic. Netanyahu said that as a temporary measure, the IDF has moved tanks into the no man's land separating Israel and Syria.
One of them is the collapse of the Separation of Forces Agreement from 1974 between Israel and Syria. This agreement held for 50 years. Last night it collapsed. The Syrian army abandoned its positions. We gave the Israeli army the order to take over these positions to ensure that no hostile force embeds itself right next to the border of Israel.
Overnight, the rebel forces entered and took control of the capital, Damascus. The Syrian army is not offering resistance, and the army command announced that Assad's regime had ended. The rebels' quick advance through Aleppo and then Homs and Hama paved the way toward Damascus. In the final days, Iranians and Russian allies departed, and the army was in retreat, with thousands of reported desertions. President Bashar al-Assad's 24-year rule ended abruptly overnight as the week-long rebel offensive reached the Syrian capital and resistance melted away. Al-Assad reportedly fled Syria for an unknown destination. His father, Hafez al-Assad, was a bitter enemy of Israel, ordering the attack on the Golan Heights in the Yom Kippur War in 1973. Unlike Egypt and Jordan, Syria never signed a peace agreement with Israel, and the nations remain in a state of war. Crowds of Syrians gathered in the central squares of Damascus and other cities recently taken by the rebels to celebrate, while chanting anti-Assad slogans. As the rebels advanced toward Damascus, its leaders said they wished for peace in the region and did not express enmity toward Israel. Its statement read that after 50 years of oppression, we announce the end of this dark period and the beginning of a new era in Syria. To the displaced all over the world, free Syria awaits you. Syria strives to be a place that coexists in peace and justice prevails and rights are established.
تحرير مدينة دمشق وإسقاط الطاغية بشار الأسد وإطلاق سراح جميع المعتقلين المظلومين من سجون النظام. إن غرفة عمليات فتح دمشق تهيب بالإخوة المجاهدين والمواطنين والحفاظ على جميع ممتلكات الدولة السورية الحرة. عاشت سوريا حرة أبية لكل السوريين بجميع أطيافهم.
The rebels included a number of elements, including those that were affiliated with Al-Qaeda and other Islamic radical anti-Western groups. Israel is closely watching to see what kind of government will be established in Damascus and what its attitude will be toward the Jewish state.
And ILTV executive editor Maayan Hoffman is reporting from the Golan border for insights into how Israel is navigating the fallout from Assad's overthrow. Maayan, what can you share with us?
Well, thank you, Lijar. I am here in the Golan Heights. I'm on the border with Syria. If you look behind me, you can see an area called Quneitra. That is the area that borders directly between Israel and Syria. Relatively quiet here. I've heard some bullets here and there, but what we're really talking about is likely gunfire from the citizens of Syria celebrating the fall of Assad's regime. Now, overnight, Israel did attack a chemical weapons factory inside Syria. The goal of that was to ensure that it didn't fall into the hands of the rebels. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu pulled together the security cabinet in order to discuss what actions might be necessary in the event of an escalation. At the same time, a number of additional tanks and manpower soldiers have gone up to the border and entered the buffer zone in order to protect the residents of the Golan Heights. We're still waiting and watching to understand more about who will ultimately take over for the Assad regime and whether or not the rebel community that will ultimately become the leaders of Syria will be able to work with and maintain the safety for the people of the State of Israel.
And joining us now with more on the fall of the Assad regime and what this means for Syria and the region is Amar Al-Selmo, White Helmets activist from Aleppo, Syria. Thank you for joining us. So one thing is certain, after 24 years, the Bashar al-Assad regime has fallen. What is the feeling like for Syrians today?
Today is a day of celebration, a day of happiness, a day of victory for every human being. Defeating this criminal, defeating this killer with his gang is a real victory for a human being, for Syrian and for a human being. Right now, Syrian can return to Syria. Imagine a million of people will return to Syria. Syria of civilization will rebuild again. And of course, we celebrating not only defeating the Assad, but also defeating the Iranian militia, defeating those terrorists who came cross border from Iraq, from Iran, from Lebanon, defeating Hezbollah. Hezbollah is like in Syria, he play a killer role, killing and supporting the criminal in Syria. Today, Syrian can unite and can have peace and can rebuild Syria, all Syria. Syrian deserve peace, deserve to be free, and deserve to work together and to have peace with each other.
And is there any concern at all on your part about the new groups in power?
Right now, our main goal is to have to rebuild Syria and to live in together, to exist together, and for justice and accountability. Actually, justice and accountability is so important. Those factions who coming from Idlib are Syrian. Those, all of them Syrian. They are the son of the displaced people who were displaced by the bus. Regarding the radicalization, if Iran, if Hezbollah did not intervene in Syria, there would be no radical people. There would be no extremist people, because the existence of those sectarian militia radicalized the group and turned Syria to be a hell during this time. But now what we have seen in Aleppo is different completely. We don't see any looting, we don't see any killing, we don't see any revenge, we see just like a freedom of belief, a freedom of movement. Everything is like we live together, and what we see from their statement is real inspiring. We have concern, every Syrian have concern. Like if any country there is the right party win the election, there will be a concern. But we depend on Syria. Syrian people can rebuild their history, can rebuild their future. Syria is Aleppo, Syria is Damascus, Syria is Homs, Syria is Hamas, Syria is Deir ez-Zor, Syria is Qamishlo. All these cities can, the people of this city can surely guarantee a new Syria with variety, with everyone to live in peace. We don't to have any enemy outside Syria. We want to have any enemy inside Syria.
So you're very optimistic that this will lead to a better future for Syria. What do you think is likely to happen in the near future?
Syrians right now are so optimistic of the future. To see the million of returnees lifting the tent and returning to their homes is really optimistic. It's really something can inspire everyone. To see the detainees. Imagine that women, children are detained with their mother in Saidnaya. Today, when we saw Saidnaya prison, where there is children, there is mother for 10 years, for 8 years, for many years, they are imprisoned without accord. This is terrorism. This is terrorism. When someone has an aircraft to attack hospital, to attack infrastructure, to attack market, this is the terrorism. To make a Captagon and spread fear, to spread death, to spread militia, to spread radicalism in Syria. This is the terrorism. The big terrorist has gone, and Syria can recover now without these terrorists.
And it's no secret that Iran was supporting the Assad regime while Turkey was backing the opposition. Iran seems to be the big loser in all of this, but a lot of powers at play here. How do you think these events will potentially reshape Syria specifically and the region as a whole?
Of course, Iran play so bad role in Syria from the beginning. If Iran did not intervene in Syria, this could happen 10 years ago. Imagine if this happened 10 years ago, and this criminal flee 10 years ago, we will not lose 1 million. We will not 1 million lives. We will not see 200,000 are considered like disappeared. We will not see 13 million displaced internally and outside. We will not see terrorism. We will not see radicalism. But because of Iran, because of the militia in Syria, because of Hezbollah in Syria, all this happened. All this accumulated and happened in Syria, and we lost Syria. Syria right now in ruin. They steal Syria right now. I can sleep without thinking that Assad, the son, the little Assad will rule my son. I right now so confident that I will not see my son detained for years without court, without even to be able to ask for him. Right now is we looking for a new Syria, peaceful Syria, peaceful with the people in Syria and peaceful with all the neighbors in Syria.
And if you had a message to the world today as a Syrian, what would this message be?
For those who are still talking about terrorists, Assad regime is the big terrorist attacking hospital. We don't see the UN talking about how Assad attacked hospital in Aleppo, the university hospital, the biggest hospital and the oldest hospital in Aleppo. We don't see the UN talking about a hospital being attacked in Idlib. So we don't from anyone just to give like a negative future for Syria. We need everyone, every country, every international community, every platform to help Syria, to collaborate with Syria, to build Syria. We need every effort from every country to help us to rebuild our country, to recover and to build free Syria for all the citizens in Syria.
Absolutely. Let's hope for a better future for the people of Syria and the region as a whole. Thank you. And as the war against Hamas wages on, all eyes are still very much on the hostages. ILTV's Ariella Lahiani is in Tel Aviv with the latest developments.
In the midst of ongoing negotiations for the hostages still held by Hamas in Gaza, a heartbreaking new video has been released by Hamas of hostage Matan Zangauka, who has been held a hostage for over 420 days now. In the video, Matan is pleading for his life, and he also criticizes the Israeli government. Now, though this emotional video has, of course, caused significant outrage, it is important to remember that this is Hamas propaganda, and this video was released with the intent of exerting psychological pressure. Now, this video, of course, just contributes to the ongoing international mediation efforts to do everything that can be done to bring the hostages home. A heartbreaking new video released by Hamas shows Israeli hostage Matan Zangauka held captive for over 420 days. In the video, Zangauka pleads for his life, describing the unbearable conditions he's enduring in captivity and calling on Israel to act. His words echo the desperation of all hostages still being held in Gaza as time grows increasingly precious for their safe return. In the propaganda video, Zangauka, who was abducted from Kibbutz Nir Oz during the October 7th attacks, speaks directly to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, criticizing the government's response and urging for an agreement to bring the hostages home. His plea highlights the suffering faced by the 100 hostages still held by Hamas, with many enduring harsh conditions, including malnutrition, isolation, and the constant threat of death. In the backdrop of this harrowing video, international efforts to secure a hostage deal intensify. Qatar has resumed its mediation efforts, meeting with senior Hamas officials in Doha, whilst US President-elect Donald Trump's team is pushing for a breakthrough before his inauguration on January 20th. His Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, has been working closely with Qatar, Israel, and Egypt to explore all possible paths to release the remaining hostages. As negotiations unfold, the fate of these hostages remain in the balance, with the world holding its breath for a resolution.
And moving on, in another incident of devastating anti-Semitism across the globe, a synagogue in Melbourne was set on fire, causing significant damage and leaving one person injured. More from ILTV's Ariella Lahiani.
A devastating fire at a synagogue in Melbourne, suspected to be an act of arson, has left Australia's Jewish community shaken and sparked international condemnation. The blaze, which severely damaged the Adass Israel synagogue early Friday, is being investigated as an act of terror. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese stated that the attack was clearly designed to instill fear and meets the definition of terrorism. Authorities are still searching for 2 masked suspects seen fleeing the scene. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu condemned the attack as a despicable act of anti-Semitism, linking it to what he calls the anti-Israel stance of Australia's Labour government, fostering an anti-Israel climate. He cited Australia's recent support of a United Nations resolution advocating for a Palestinian state and its refusal to grant a visa to a former Israeli minister. The incident has also drawn harsh criticism from Australian media figures. Sky News host Shari Markson accused Albanese of failing to take a firm stand against rising anti-Semitism, saying racism against Jews has been tolerated. Australia has faced a surge in anti-Semitic and Islamophobic incidents since the start of the Israel-Hamas war last October. While most pro-Palestinian protests have remained peaceful, tensions are rising. Australian authorities insist they are committed to combating anti-Semitism with recent investments in Jewish community security. But as investigations continue, Jewish communities in Australia and beyond are left shaken by this latest attack.
And joining us now with more on the arson of the Adas Israel Synagogue in Melbourne is Alon Cassuto, CEO of the Zionist Federation of Australia. Alon, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Pleasure, Lida. Thanks for having me.
So the Australian government is now calling the arson an act of terror. This is shocking, but perhaps unsurprising given the rising tide of anti-Semitism in Australia this past year. How is the Jewish community in Australia coping? I mean, what is the sentiment after such a hateful incident?
Look, Lida, I think our community is shocked and devastated and really heartbroken, and at the same time not entirely surprised. We've been living this daily. We've seen escalations happening all the time, whether it's a rabbi's house that's been attacked, whether it's a synagogue in Sydney that went into lockdown, whether it's Jewish stores that are being targeted, Jewish schools that are being graffitied. Our very own, building that I work in has been graffitied and viled. We've seen members of parliament, Jewish members of parliament, have their offices lit on fire in arson attacks. So it's been really the kind of escalation that's been happening over the course of many months. And our community, I think the saddest thing for our community is that many are losing hope that things will get better and are starting to expect things to get worse. And that's the beginning of the end, when a community that has been so strong and thriving and unified throughout all of the trauma and difficulty post-October 7th, both in terms of our emotions connected to Israel as well as back here in Australia, are really starting to wonder where is this headed? Where does this end?
And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that it's impossible to separate the synagogue arson from what he said, the extreme anti-Israel position of the Labour government in Australia. That's a very powerful accusation. I mean, would you agree with this statement?
Look, I think that what we've seen is that over the course of the last 14 months, the government has increasingly moved further and further away from its historical bipartisan support for Israel and its right to defend itself. And we've seen a series of stances taken on the international stage by Australia, which are very regrettable, including supporting very biased and one-sided UN resolutions. We've seen recently the denial of a visa to former Minister Ayelet Shaked, who was not allowed to come into Australia, and that was taken as a very strong personal affront by many in the community. And so, while I wouldn't say that the government's position on Israel is the reason for this escalating anti-Semitism, it's certainly not helping. And by demonizing Israel, by creating an unfair standard by which Israel is expected to conduct itself, it's certainly not helping the local community who's so deeply connected to Israel and feels so strongly that Israel has been represented in the most unfair terms by the Australian government. And so I'd say that when you see burnt Sifrei Torah being pulled out of a synagogue, your heart breaks, and we can't think but what happened 86 years ago in Kristallnacht, and we can't help but think of 1930s Europe and Germany. And at the same time, I think that part of the difference is that today Jews in the diaspora know that they do have Israel and want a strong Israel. But Israel does depend on its friends and allies around the world. And in that respect, Australia has historically been an ally. And to suddenly wake up and think, well, is bipartisan support in Australia for the state of Israel at risk? That's a real concern for the community here.
Absolutely. And I want to ask, as far as you know, is the threat to the Jewish community now over, or is there still sort of any active threat out there against the community? And are more security efforts going to be taken now by the community or by the Australian government to prevent another such attack?
Well, we know that the two people who committed this act of terror are still at large. They still haven't caught them. So we're deeply concerned because another attack could happen. Certainly copycat attacks could happen. And until they understand who did this and until they catch them and put them behind bars and put them to justice, then of course, the community is deeply concerned. The government came out today and actually announced $32 million in measures, security measures for the Jewish community. So that's been a pretty significant gesture, but of course that's a reactive gesture. It's not a proactive gesture. And so in terms of actually stamping out the risk to our community, stamping out anti-Semitism, making our community feel safe, it's going to be a lag effect. And it's certainly, as far as I'm concerned, as someone who sends his children to the local Jewish school, as someone who prays in the synagogue around the corner, as someone who works in the Jewish community center, I'm more concerned than I've ever been for the security of my family, my community, and our people. And so in that respect, I think it's a very different Australia to what we knew up until a year and a bit ago.
That's very disconcerting to hear. Let's hope first and foremost they catch those responsible for this horrific act. Alon, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Lidal.
And now in some positive news, the season of Hanukkah is fast approaching, and ILTV is proud to partner with Blessed by Israel, a company that brings you extraordinary products handcrafted by the brave pioneers of Judea and Samaria. Every purchase supports their mission and strengthens Israel's heartland. Let's take a closer look at Blessed by Israel's line for the Hanukkah holiday and how you can make a difference today.
As the world moves to boycott Israel, the people working to restore life to the biblical heartland face daily challenges. Blessed by Israel offers a simple way to support these efforts by bringing unique and beautiful products from Judea and Samaria directly to you. From the hilltops of God's land to your home, you can find exceptional items crafted by families and small businesses in the heart of Israel. With U.S.-based warehouses, Blessed by Israel ensures affordable prices and fast delivery. Choose from a range of products, including skincare, artisan flowers and foods, olive oil, tahini, honey, and much more. There are many great options for giving wonderful gifts to your loved ones. Visit blessedbyisrael.com to explore these products and discover the inspiring stories behind them. Scan the QR code on your screen to take part in fulfilling God's prophecies.
And now, let's take a look at the weather forecast. Mostly clear skies are expected tonight around the country, and temperatures should reach lows of around 11 degrees Celsius or 52 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow, mostly sunny skies are expected alongside warm temperatures set to reach highs of 21 degrees Celsius or 71 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channel, subscribe to our newsletter, and explore our website, iltv.tv. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Lijar Gravelazi. Be well, stay safe, and thank you so much for watching.